Begin today the Gemara on Daf Tezvav, right at the beginning of the Daf Efshir L'Tekuna. The Gemara here is in the middle of a discussion regarding the stage of Aveda in Karbonis that's called Halacha, delivering the blood from the animal that was slaughtered to the Mizbeach. So the last point the Gemara here said regarding the Halacha is that when you deliver the blood, the person has to move with his feet. If he's just handing it with his hands, but he's not moving from his place, that's not a halacha. That doesn't qualify as a halacha. You have to actually move with your feet. Okay, so now the Gemara continues and has a shaila regarding this conclusion. Says the Gemara, Efshir l'tekuna, is this something that would be possible to fix, or lo efshir l'tekuna, or this cannot be fixed? What's the Gemara saying? If a kohen did the halacha without moving, he just stretched out his hand to deliver the blood to the mizbeach, so he did the halacha in the wrong way. Usually, regarding any stage of aveda in the karbonis, if it's done in a pasul way, so then it passels the carbon, it passels the blood, and you have to start again from the beginning. So the question is, since we said regarding the halacha that you have to move with your feet and stretching your hand is not a proper halacha. The question though is this a problem to the extent that it completely invalidates this and it cannot be fixed again and you're going to have to start over from the beginning? Or maybe not. Maybe it's just, it's lacking the full halacha. You didn't move with your feet. But it's not to the extent that it actually invalidates it. Like, for example, if a zar would do the halacha, so then he invalidates a mamish. But over here, it's just lacking the full proper extent of the halacha. But you could now fix it. You can do the halacha, take it back, and do now the halacha beregel.
The same claim does both?
Does what? What do you mean about? To fix it? Yeah.
No. The same claim does the halacha and the zrika?
Yeah, why not? Okay. Toshema, so the Gemara says, we can prove this from the Mishnah that the Gemara here quoted at the end of Daf Yudalet. And it's a Mishnah later here in the Masechta. So it says, Kibala kosher, if a kohen that's kosher received the blood in a vessel, and then what did he do? V'nosan leposel. He gave this blood to someone else, which is posel. Yachzer lekosher. So that one that's posel gives the blood back to the kohen, which is kosher. And then the kohen that's kosher can continue doing the avodah with this. So the fact that the kohen that's posel had it in his hands does not passel this blood. You can give it back to the kosher and he can do the avodah. So right here you see that the kohen stretched out his hands and he gave it to someone that's posel. That's a halacha that he did. He's delivering it closer to the mizbeach without moving with his feet. But then it says that he can give it back. And now this kohen will take it walking with his feet. So you see that you can fix this. The Gemara says, and he nami, and even if you also are going to say, this is what the Gemara said before in Daf Yudalid, that you have to switch the lashon of the Mishnah there, the yachzer hakosher v'yikableno. Instead of what we just read, which sounds like that if the kohen that's kosher gave it to someone which is posel, so now the one that's posel has to give it back, so to go back to where it came from, to the kohen that's kosher. But the Gemara before said that you also could read the Mishnah differently. That the one that's posel doesn't have to go back to where it was before, but that kosher kohen or another kohen goes to the other side of this person which is posel that's closer to the mizbeach and takes it from him there. The one he gives it him to continue bringing it to the mizbeach. So even if you say that that's the case, but what do you see over here? You see that even though there was a halacha that was done, shaloi beregel, it's going to be kosher. So the Gemara says, if you're going to say that once you did a halacha without moving your feet, this is something that's possible to the point that you cannot rectify this anymore, so then ifsalallah. So then it passel the aveda with his blood. So why is the kohen that's kosher taking it back and continuing the aveda? So we see here clearly that it's going to still be kosher. But the Gemara says, no, it's not a raya, because mi savris, the koi, zar gavoi, this person that's posel, that got the blood into his hands. Do you think that where was he standing? He was standing closer to the mizbeach, and therefore when the kohen stretched out his hands and gave it to him, he did a posel halacha because he got it closer to the mizbeach by stretching out his hands to him. That's not the case here. If that would have been the case, maybe take would have became posel. Loi, that's not the case. Rather, the koi zar beroi. The zar is standing over here, further away from the mizbeach. So when you stretched out your hand to this person that's a non-kohen and you gave him the blood, you actually didn't do any halacha at all. Adarabah, you stretched out, you gave it to a person that's further from the Mizbeach. That's why it does not invalidate this.
Like this non-Kohen is in the Azara.
It's a good question. What is he doing there? It's a good question. But he's there. He's there. But the point is that it's interesting what it's saying over here. It comes out that when you do the Hilacha, when you're actually delivering it closer to the Mizbeach, if it's done wrong, that's going to be a problem because you're delivering it in the wrong way. It has to be dafke beregel. That would passel maybe the blood. But if you give it to someone that's standing there further from the Mizbeach, so you didn't do any Hilacha at all. Not beregel, and not even shaloi beregel, because it just went further away from the Mizbeach. That's not going to passel it. Then the apostle just has to give it back to this kain to bring it closer to the Mizbeach. So therefore there's no raya from this case over here.
But the Zar, it can't do the Avodah anyways.
Correct.
So once you gave it to the Zar, the Chayre, you should say it's no good.
But the
So,
synthesis.
and it's saying that you
can give it back, correct.
Give it back to Misaki.
Correct.
What's
Yeah.
the difference where he's standing with Chayre?
So again, I explained the point that if he's closer to the Mizbeach, then you did a hilacha, a pasal hilacha, because you just did an act to bring it closer to the Mizbeach. How? You did that act of bringing it closer to the Mizbeach in a pasal way. But if you gave it to the Zar that's further from the Mizbeach, you did no act of hilacha b'chlal. You did nothing. You gave it to someone that's further from the Mizbeach. So the fact that the apostle was holding it and you gave it to someone that's further from the Mizbeach, that doesn't passel the blood. If you do an avodah in a apostle way, which means that you're bringing it closer to the Mizbeach in a apostle way, then it's an issue. But not if he's beroi, not if you give it to him in a way that there's no avodah done here at all. So Itmer, we learned about this Shaila, Omar Ula, Omar Rabbi Yechanan. So Ula says in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Haylacha, Shaloi Beregel, if a person is delivering the blood to the Mizbeach, not moving his feet, Psula. It's going to be Pasal. So here, or the other gear says Pasla. He passels it all together. So before was also a quote, Ula in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, at the end of Daf Yudal. There it said, Loishma Haylacha. Here it says Pasla. It passels the blood, you can't fix this anymore. Alma loy efshel tkuna. So we see that here Rabbi Yechanan is adding and he's saying that you cannot rectify this. Okay, so the Gemara now asks on this from another Mishnah later in the Masechta. Eisvei Rav Nachman Ula. Rav Nachman asks Ula. The Mishnah says as follows: Nishbach men akeli ala ritzpa. If the kain received the blood into a keli, but then from the keli the blood spilled out on the floor, and va'asvei he gathered the blood from the floor. Kosher, this is kosher to be used for the zrika on the mizbeach. And the reason is, if the blood of the throat from the animal would have went straight on the floor and there was never a kabbalah, you never received it in a keli, then you can't use that blood. But because it was received in the keli and then it spilled, you're allowed to use it. But what's the point of here? When the blood spills on the ground, the blood splashes, and a part of the blood that just fell to the ground splashes closer to the mizbeach as well. It splashes all over, so it splashes closer to the mizbeach as well. And then you're picking up that blood in that area which is already closer to the mizbeach, and then you're walking with it to the mizbeach. So what does that mean? You just took blood that got closer to the mizbeach without you walking with your feet bringing it, and then you're bringing it to the mizbeach. So, but according to what Rabbi Yechanan here said, or Ula says in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, you can't bring blood closer to the mizbeach in any way other than walking with your feet. And if it was brought closer to the mizbeach in any other way, it passes the blood right there. So if so, the very fact that the blood spilled on the floor and got closer to the mizbeach without you walking with your feet, that should pass the blood. How are you picking up this blood now and taking it and spraying it on the mizbeach? And says the Gemara, so this Mishnah, what is it speaking about? That the blood splashed only outside. Levroi. This is the answer. The blood splashed outside, meaning similar to the point we said before. The blood did not get closer to the mizbeach when it fell to the ground. Adarabah, the blood splashed further away. So there's no hilacha that was done here in a oifen that's possible. The kain is picking it up further away and now bringing it fully with his feet to the mizbeach. How could you say this? When blood falls to the ground and it splashes, it knows the halacha. The blood itself knows how it has to splash. It only splashes further away and it doesn't splash in. It naturally splashes in all directions, and it doesn't say any limitation of the mission. It says you pick up the blood from the ground and bring it to the mizbeach. It says the Gemara b'mokim madrin. It's speaking about a place where there's a slant, and therefore the blood, it only splashes outward, not inward. I'm not sure exactly where in the Azara. No, this is not in the Mizbeach, it's in the Azara. But yes, seemingly it is. But the Gemara here says that it's a place where there was a slant and it splashed down. Or Iba Yisayme Beguma. There's a pit, or there's some hole there where the blood splashed into the pit right over there, so there was nothing of the blood that got any closer to the Mizbeach. Or the case over here is, we're talking about the blood that was first received in the vessel. And so it didn't spill right away. It's besmicha. The blood was in the vessel for a while already, and it's already thicker blood. And when it falls to the ground, it doesn't splash. It just falls right there. So none of his blood ever got closer to the Mizbeach without the Kayin delivering it, walking with his feet. Fragt the Gemara, how could he say this? V'ichpul tane, lashminan kol hani. The Tana is saying this halacha about the blood that spilled from the vessel only in these strange kind of cases. And this is when he's saying that the Kayin can pick it up and bring it to the Mizbeach. Tana is saying a case which doesn't sound like there's any limitations. The Tana is only speaking about all these strange cases. V'oid, another proof that this can't be the pshat on this Mishnah there. Adatani bidach pirkin, it says there afterwards. It says in the Perek later. It's actually two different places, but it says in another Mishnah, Nishpach ala ritzpa, what happens if the blood spilled directly on the ground? It was never received in a vessel. Va'asvay, and now you're gathering the blood from the ground, puzzle. This blood that was never received in a vessel is actually puzzle to be used for the zrika of the carbon. You're missing that original Kabbalah, went straight to the floor. So the question is, why is the Tan of the Mishnah in these two Mishnahs here making a distinction whether this blood could be used or not if it was first received in the vessel and then it spilled, or it was never received in a vessel at all? According to what we're saying here, liflaik bididei, the Mishnah can make a distinction in the very same case that it's talking about when it was received in the vessel. And it could say as follows, when do I say that this blood that spilled from the vessel to the ground could be used? That's if it spilled and it splashed only further away from the Mizbeach. So there's no aspect of halacha of this blood getting closer to the Mizbeach without the Kayin delivering it with his feet. But if it spilled to the ground and part of the blood went further, closer to the Mizbeach, so then puzzle. Then if the Kayin is going to pick it up and bring it to the Mizbeach, it's puzzle because it already got closer without his feet. So the fact that the Tana does not make this distinction shows that this is not a distinction. Therefore the Gemara concludes, to Yufte, this refutes what Ula said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. The halacha has to be done beregel, but even if it was not, the carbon will still be, you can still continue the avodah with the blood, and it will be, you can rectify this, it will still be kosher. Okay, but now the Gemara brings about this, Itmer, we learned that halacha shaloi beregel, this shaila about halacha delivering the blood when it's not being done with the feet of the kohen walking, machloikis Rab Shimon v'Rabbanan. That this is a machlokes between Rab Shimon and the Rabbanan. This goes back to the Rab Shimon and the Rabbanan in the Mishnah on Daf Yud Gimel. So in the Mishnah on Daf Yud Gimel, it brought the Rab Shimon and Rabbanan that argue. Rabbanan say that halacha is like the other avodas of the carbon until zrike, that the machshava shaloi lishma will passel it. Rab Shimon though says that halacha, since it's a kind of avodah, does not have to be done. You can shecht in a place where there's no need for halacha at all. Therefore, halacha is not an avodah that the machshava shaloi lishma will passel the carbon. That's the machlokes of Rab Shimon and the Rabbanan. So now over here, the Gemara is bringing a pshat that this shaila about the halacha shaloi beregel is dependent on this machlokes of Rab Shimon and Rabbanan, or rather, not only dependent. The Gemara here actually will now explain a fresh way how to understand what's b'chlal this machlokes of Rab Shimon and Rabbanan. Until this point, the Gemara discussed before machlokes of Rab Shimon and Rabbanan. We understood that Rab Shimon is saying that halacha, when the kohen delivers the blood with his feet, since it's a kind of avodah that's not necessary to be done, if you shecht right near the mizbeach, so that kind of halacha, a machshava shaloi lishma, cannot passel the carbon because it's not necessary. But here the Gemara has a new pshat. The Gemara says as follows: that v'halacha rabbasi, if we're talking about a regular, full-fledged halacha where the kohen is walking with his feet to deliver the blood to the mizbeach, kula amalei pligi de psula. Nobody will argue, Rab Shimon will agree that in such a case, the carbon will be possible. Meaning Rab Shimon agrees, even though it's something that's not necessary to be done, but since this is a full-fledged halacha with the feet, a machshava shaloi lishma will passel the carbon here. Ki pligi, where's the argument between Rab Shimon and the Rabbanan? Halacha zutrasi. When there is the halacha that we're talking about over here, this minor halacha, meaning when a person is just stretching out his hand, he's delivering it without walking with his feet. Here is where there is the machlokes between Rab Shimon and the Rabbanan, whether it will be possible or not. The Rabbanan say that even if you just stretched out your hand, over here, this kind of halacha will also passel the carbon, the machshava shaloi lishma. Because that halacha is considered to be a halacha as well. But according to Rab Shimon, the this halacha zutrasi is not considered to be a halacha. That's the machlokes over here. Okay, so this is a new pshat. This is not the pshat that the Gemara understood until now. Benegay to the halacha of benegay to the machlokes of Rab Shimon and Rabbanan. Benegay to the halacha. Okay, yeah. So the thing is that this. The way the Gemara is explaining over here, this thing of halacha zutrasi, it's a little bit different than what the Gemara was discussing till now. Because until now, the Gemara was discussing a situation where the animal was shechted far from the Mizbeach. And you have to walk to bring it to the Mizbeach. And the Gemara was discussing what happened if he didn't walk. He stretched out his hand. It's not a good halacha. The question is, could that be rectified or not, and so on. Here the Gemara is saying, halacha zutrasi, the Gemara means to say, a behemoth that was actually shechted right near the Mizbeach. There is no need to do any halacha. And right there, all he's doing is he's stretching out his hand. Stretching out his hand to do the zrika on the Mizbeach. Over here, when you stretch out your hand, when there isn't necessary to do any halacha. Here's the machlokes between Rab Shimon and the Rabbanon, whether that halacha, that act of stretching out your hand is significant enough that you could pass it with a machshava shlei lishma. So machkola b'marove in Eretz Yisrael, in the West, they laughed, they scoffed on this pshat in the machlokes of Rab Shimon and the Rabbanon. Why? Because they said if this is the case, elo, if so, chatos ha'oif, the psula ba machshava, when you shecht a bird, now chatos ha'oif, it's really not shechted. What's the story with a bird? A bird, there's malika, it's done with the sharp nail that cuts off the head of the bird. And this is done actually right near the Mizbeach. And there's no need to walk anywhere. It's done right near the Mizbeach. And what else is unique about the chatas ha'oif? How is the blood sprayed on the Mizbeach? So as the Gemara is going to explain over here, you take the actual bird itself and you have to get the blood out. You have to shake it up and down in order to get the blood out. And then you spray it like that on the Mizbeach. That's how it's done. Okay, so now this chatas ha'oif, the halacha of a machshava shaloi lishma or pigul that could passel it applies by chatas ha'oif as well. Rashi brings it, so you see it from the pasuk. It's clear that the concept of passeling chatas ha'oif applies by the zrika of the chatas ha'oif as well. Actually, by the chatas ha'oif, the Torah does not use the term zrika. Zrika is a term that's used when you have a vessel full of blood and you splash, you spray the blood. Over here, it's called hazah. It's different because it's the blood that comes directly from the bird itself that you have to shake and get out the blood and then squirt it that it goes towards the Mizbeach and it lands on the Mizbeach. But the question is now, according to Rab Shimon, it would come out that regarding the chatas ha'oif, the psula ba, that the kavanah shalei lishma would, or any psula would passel it, machshava that is, Rab Shimon echem ishkachas lo. According to Rab Shimon, how is this possible? Why? Because what did we just say? According to Rab Shimon, a hilacha zutresi, when there's a halacha that you're not walking with your feet, that's not a significant halacha. So if so, over here regarding this bird, how is it done? So as I said, the bird is, you shake the bird in order to get the blood to come out, and then the blood comes out from the bird when you do that, when you shake it, and then the blood lands in the Mizbeach. Says the Gemara, if he had this machshava shalei lishma before the blood comes out, so that machshava is nothing. It's not going to invalidate because it's before the blood came out. It's not yet at the time of the hazah, of the sprinkling of this blood. And it's after the blood already came out from the bird. So once the blood comes out from the bird, even before it lands on the mizbeach, the mitzvah is done. This is a unique point here that the Gemara is saying, the question that they had in Marov and Eretz Yisrael. That when it comes to zrike, the Torah clearly says, we say the lashon of the pasuk every morning, v'zarku ala mizbeach, that the zrike is on the mizbeach. The mitzvah is fulfilled when the blood is actually sprayed and it lands on the mizbeach, but not over here. Over here, the Gemara understands by this blood of the bird, the main mitzvah is to shake the bird to get the blood out that goes towards the mizbeach, and the mitzvah is fulfilled even before the blood lands on the mizbeach. And there's a similar thing also regarding the carbon chatos that's brought inside the Beis HaMikdash, and this is actually on Yom Kippur also, that when the blood that's brought inside, the mitzvah is to spray the blood, hazah, and even if it doesn't land on the Mizbeach, or even if you spray the blood towards the Paroiches and it doesn't land over there, the mitzvah is to spray in that direction. even before it lands, it's the fulfillment of the mitzvah. So if so, what the Gemara is saying over here is, according to Rab Shimon, there is no aspect in this hazah that you could say that a person would have a kavanah shalei lishma to passel it.
While it's shaking.
Again?
While it's shaking.
That's before the mitzvah is done. After the blood comes out, the mitzvah is already complete, because the blood is already heading in the direction of the mizbeach, even before it lands on the mizbeach. That's how the Gemara understands this now. Now, the Rashi here explains that if we would learn the pshat and Rab Shimon's opinion the way we understand it simply, that Rab Shimon holds anything that's done in the process, in the steps of the carbon, that's a necessary step, the machshava shaloi lishma will passel. Anything that's not necessary will not passel. That's how we understood Rab Shimon till now. So over here, what you're doing here, you're shaking the bird and you're making the blood come out. It's a necessary step in the avodah, so the machshava here will passel. But since we just said that according to Rab Shimon, that's not the point. Rab Shimon says that halacha zutrasi is not a halacha. So over here, regarding the zrika, or rather the hazah of this bird, when you shake that bird, that shaking is equivalent to the person that's stretching out his hand, getting it closer to the mizbeach. According to the Rabbanon, that shaking of the bird is a halacha zutrasi, where the machshava shalei lishma will passel. Just like when you stretch out your hand, it's significant to passel. Shaking of the bird is also a act that's significant to passel if you have a machshava shalei lishma then. But according to Rab Shimon, the shaking of the bird is insignificant. So therefore, how could a machshava shalei lishma passel by a chatas hanayif? Chatas hanayif. That's the Gemara Shaila here. Okay, but the Gemara says in this, my kushya. What's the question? Dilma, I can tell you, no, not like they understood in Eretz Yisrael, not like the Gemara is saying that they understood there. Really, midiparish, from the moment that the blood, parish dam de bachadz, from the moment that the blood leaves from the body of the bird, va'ad the motel mizbeach, and until the blood splashes and actually reaches the mizbeach, that's the time of the hazah that if the kain has a machshava shalei lishma, it'll passel. In other words, the Gemara is saying, no, it's not true. It's not, the Aveda is not complete when it came out of the body of the bird before it landed on the Mizbeach. Not only after it landed on the Mizbeach, then the Aveda is complete. And the Gemara brings a source for this. Because the boy minei Rabbi Yirmiyah and Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Yirmiyah asked Rabbi Zera, Shaila, regarding what we're talking about over here. Ha yom mazeh v'nikta yodei shel mazeh at shelo yegiya dam laver ha-mizbeach mahu. The kayin that's spraying this blood, and we're talking over here specifically about this kind of a spraying. Chatas ha'oif, and the chatas that's brought inside the Beis HaMikdash. As I mentioned, there's what's called, usually when we speak about blood in the Beis HaMikdash, what is it called? Zrike. That you spray the blood, it has to go from the vessel onto the Mizbeach. There it's clear, it says in the Pasuk, Ala Mizbeach. But over here we're talking about hazah. Hazah means that you're throwing it towards the Mizbeach. That's what it sounds like. It doesn't say it's clearly in the Pasuk, Ala Mizbeach. So therefore the Shaila that Rabbi Yirmiyah asks is that he was mazeh, the Kayin sprayed this blood, or he shook the bird and the blood came out of the bird, or he brings the chatas inside the Beis HaMikdash and he sprays it towards the Pereiches. But then what happened was, v'nikta yodeh shel mazeh, the hand of the Kayin got amputated, actually yigiyah down lavar Mizbeach, before the blood actually landed on the Mizbeach. Now a Kayin that's a Baal Mum can't do the Aveda. So here his hand is amputated, he's a Baal Mum. But when did his hand get amputated? And that moment, between when he sprayed it and it landed on the Mizbeach. The question is, do I say that when he sprayed it, his Aveda is complete, and therefore the fact that his hand got amputated afterwards doesn't matter, because it's already after the fact? Or no, until it lands on the Mizbeach, he did not complete the Aveda, and therefore it's going to come out that it's a Baal Mun that's involved in this Aveda here. And Abzeira answered, Psula. Then in such a case, until it lands on the Mizbeach, it's going to be possible if the Kayin got his hand amputated. My timer, what's the reason for this? Because in the Pasuk, even when it speaks here about this case, and here it's speaking about the Chatas inside the Beis HaMikdash, that you spray towards the Pereiches, it says Vihiza, but it also then says V'nosan. So in the next pasuk, it uses the term v'nasan, which means v'hiza v'nasan b'inon. That's you have to spray it, but not only spray, but v'nasan. V'nasan means it has to be given there. It has to actually land on the mizbeach. So therefore, this is not a question in Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara said that they laughed in Eretz Yisrael over here on this halacha, that according to According to who are we talking about over here? Rab Shimon. According to Rab Shimon, regarding the bird, at what moment of the Chatas Ha'oif could you have a machshava shaloi lishma? It's very simple. When you spray the blood, you shake it. You shake the bird, and the blood comes out until the moment that it lands on the mizbeach. Then that's the time when the machshava shaloi lishma passes. So the Gemara now says that still in Eretz Yisrael they didn't agree to this pshat in Rab Shimon's opinion. Ki aser Rav Papa, Rav Huna bereded Rav Yeshua, mi bei Rav. When they came from Rav or from the yeshiva, Amri, they said, Hainu chuche. This is why they laughed on this pshat in Eretz Yisrael. Because what did we say? That according to Rab Shimon, there is no machlokes regarding halacha. Rab Shimon agrees that when the kohen delivers the blood with his feet, that the machshava shlei lishma will pass. So they laughed and they said, regarding the regular halacha, walking with the feet, is there no machlokes here? Did Rab Shimon not say that in such a case the halacha will not pass? That the machshava will not pass? Look into the words of the Mishnah. You'll see clearly that Rab Shimon is arguing regarding every halacha. What's the lashon of Rab Shimon in the Mishnah? Rab Shimon says, machsher behiluch, because he said that efsher shaloi b'shchitiv, shaloi b'kabalav, shaloi b'zrika, efsher b'loi hiluch. It's possible that you shouldn't have to walk. That's his words. Since you could shecht right near the mizbeach, it's possible that you shouldn't have to walk. So therefore, even when you do walk, the machshava shaloi lishma doesn't pass. So Rab Shimon clearly is saying that a regular halacha, since it's possible to do without it, it will not pass. So how can we say this new pshat here in the words of Rab Shimon? So therefore, Ella, the Gemara concludes, by halacha zutrasi, when it comes to halacha, when it's shechted right near the mizbeach, and you don't have to walk at all, you're just stretching out your hand, kula amalei pligi, nobody will argue, the main girsa of Rashi here is, nobody will argue the pasla. Then in such a case, it will passel. Since this is a necessary avodah that has to be done, Rab Shimon says if it's a necessary avodah, then the machshava then passel. So when you're standing right near the mizbeach and your hand has to be stretched out, or by the bird, you shake the bird that has to be done, it will definitely passel. Okay, there is the other girsa here that Rashi says also that you could say that everybody agrees that it will not passel because it's not the full-fledged halacha walking with it. Okay. The machlekes of Rab Shimon and the Rabbanan is by halacha rabasi. When you walk with your feet, since it's not necessarily always done, so therefore, Rab Shimon says that machshava, when you walk with it with your feet, will not passel the carbon. The Gemara has another shaila.
That means everybody holds you cannot shecht next to the mizbeach.
No, you could shecht next to the mizbeach. You could shecht next to the mizbeach. When the Gemara says loy pligi, the Gemara is saying regarding the machshava of shaloi lishma, that when you stretch out your hands, according to the first gersa, Rashi says that's something which must be done, and therefore it's significant enough that your machshava at that time will passel the carbon, if it's a machshava shaloi lishma. Okay, the Gemara has another shaila regarding the halacha. Halichai zar. If a zar, non-kayin, is bringing the blood to the mizbeach, so that's a pasal aveda. The zar that did it. But now what happened? V'hechzirei kayin v'chazar v'helichai. And now it was brought back, and the kayin went and brought it. So there was halacha done once, and then a second halacha, it was brought back, and the kayin did the halacha. Is this going to be okay? Pligi ba b'nei Rab Chiya v'Rab Yanai. So the b'nei Rab Chiya and Rab Yanai argued about this. Chad Amar, one opinion is kosher. That in such a case it will be kosher. Chad Amar pasal. Another opinion is that it's pasal. So what's the machlekes? Mar savar efshel l'tekuna. One opinion over here is that this could be rectified, even if a zar is the one that did the halacha. But you look at the second halacha. The second halacha is done by the kohen, so the second halacha is good, so it can be rectified. But a mar savar, the other opinion is lo yafshel l'tekuna. Once a zar, a non-kohen, does the halacha, it invalidates it completely. The first halacha is what's significant. The second halacha cannot rectify that. Again? Oh, so we're talking about Mekavoy. The zar brought it closer to the mizbeach.
That's what I'm saying. The Gemara said it's closer, it's further away.
The Gemara was saying that before regarding the shaila, had an iboya, so the Gemara brought that as a pircha on the raya. But over here, before we were discussing when there was a halacha that was done shaloi beregal. Now we're talking about something else, which is seemingly even a more of a sibah that it should be pasal. Not just the halacha shaloi beregal. There was actually a zar that did the halacha, and now it was brought back. Now the Gemara has a shaila whether the second halacha could fix the first, or the first halacha already establishes the psul, and you cannot fix this. That's the machlekes here.
Didn't we learn a few pages back that a zar as far as halacha, it's not going to be a problem with the
No,
Azar?
I don't know.
Because all the four ones I've
It's a
looked at.
shaila here. Here's the shaila. This is the shaila about the halacha, whether this could be fixed or not. Do you follow the status of the first halacha, or do you follow the status of the second halacha that fixes it? So now here the Gemara says the same machlekes seemingly would apply also in the opposite kind of a case. What happens if first Haylichai Kayin, the Kayin brought it towards the Mizbeach, and then Vechzirai, and then for whatever reason you went back, and V'chazav Haylichai Zar, and then the second halacha is done now by the non-Kayin.
What happens?
So Amar Rav Shimi Barashi, so Rav Shimi Barashi says that over here the same machlekes will apply, but in the opposite, because Ledivri Amachsher, the one that said before that it will be kosher. Why? Because he says the second halacha is significant. The second halacha can fix the first, so we go by the second. So if so, in this case, pasul. Over here, it's going to be pasul. Why? Because in this case, the second halacha is done by the zar. Mm-hmm. The kayin brought it the first time, but the final and second halacha is done by the zar, so that will pasul. However, l'divrei hapaisel, the opinion that says before that we follow the status of the first halacha, and therefore it passes, and now the second halacha cannot fix that. So over here, machsher. Over here, the first halacha was done by the kayin. The fact that it was brought back afterwards, and now a non-kayin does the second halacha is already like an unnecessary thing. The first halacha was done right, so it's good. But the Gemara says, Rava argues in this. Rava says, Afla divrei paisel, even according to the opinion that said before that it would be pasul, meaning that you go by the status of the first halacha, and over here the first halacha was done by the kayin, but pasul. Nevertheless, if it was brought back and the second halacha is done by a zar, it will be pasul as well. My time, and what's the reason? Because the hatzarech lam tuyeh. Even though we said before that the first halacha done by a zar will pasul, but over here, in this case, true, the first halacha was done by a kayin, so that's kosher, but now it was brought back, and now you have to bring it again. So the fact is, you're back into the same place where you were in the beginning, and you do have to bring it back to the Mizbeach. So if a zar brought it back to the Mizbeach, it will passel, even according to this opinion. Amalei Rav Yirmiyah, Rav Ashi, Rav Yirmiyah says to Rav Ashi that midifti, that is Rav Yirmiyah, hachi Amar Rav Yirmiyah midifti. Rav Yirmiyah midifti said that ha tzarech lam tuyah. This point, that even though it was already brought once, but if it was brought back, and you have to bring it a second time, so the second halacha is also going to be something that must be done by a kayin. So this is actually machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbanan. This is the machlokes. This is going back to the Mishnah. This will be the machlokes of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbanan. This is in the Mishnah. The Mishnah brings Rabbi Eliezer's opinion regarding halacha. What does it say? The Tanan, the Mishnah said before, Rabbi Eliezer says, the Mishnah is discussing the machshava shalei lishma regarding halacha. Does that passel the carbon or not? So Rabbi Eliezer says in the Mishnah, hamahalach b'makom shetzarech lahalech. If you walked with the blood in the place where it's necessary to walk with it, machshava peiseles. The machshava you have at that time will passel the aveda, will passel the carbon. Makom but if you're walking with the blood in the place where you do not have to walk with it, a machshava peiseles. A machshava shalei lishma at that kind of halacha will not passel the carbon. That's what Rabbi Eliezer is saying in the end of the Mishnah, and he's arguing on the Tanakama. The Tanakama says halacha will always passel. Rab Shimon says halacha will never passel by the machshava shalei lishma by halacha. Rabbi Eliezer says it depends if it's needed or not. So now, how does Rava explain this machlekes? What's Rabbi Eliezer adding here? Rava explained, everybody will agree, you receive the blood in a place outside, further away from the Mizbeach, and now you're walking with the blood coming closer to the Mizbeach with it. That's called a hilach that's necessary, because now it's necessary, and you're doing something to bring it closer to the Mizbeach. There, Rabbi Eliezer is saying, and everybody would agree, that it would be possible if you have a machshava shalei lishma. On the other hand, kiblei b'fnim vaytzia lechotz, if you makabel the blood in a place closer to the Mizbeach, and now he walked with it further away from the Mizbeach, so he's walking, not getting it closer at all. Zeu hilach shein tzarech lahalach. That's walking in a way that's not necessary at all. Everybody would agree, even the Tanakama, that a machshava shalei lishma, that kind of a hilach is not, he's taking a detour, and he's having so it's not going to passel at all. When nachluku, where's the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Tanakama? Elakeshech nisai. He already brought the blood in once. There was the first halacha, and now for whatever reason it was brought out again further away, and now he has to bring it a second time. So the question is, when he's bringing it the second time and he has a machshava shalei lishma, will it passel or not? Mar savar hatzarech lam tuyeh. So the Tanakama of the Mishnah holds the fact is he has to bring it back. so therefore it's going to passel. But Amar Sava, no, lav kehiluch hatzarech la'aved damir. Rabbi Eliezer says, because it was brought once, the fact that you brought it out and you bring it a second time, but because it was already there, this is not called tzarech, that it was necessary. The second hiluch, when you have a machshava, then it will not passel. So now the Gemara is saying that this point that Rav has said, that the second hiluch is also a significant aveda because you have to bring it again. This itself is here the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanon in the Mishnah. But the Gemara asks in this, again?
It doesn't hold from them too.
Exactly, Rabbi Eliezer doesn't hold of that concept. But Abaye asks on this, it is a brisa where it's mashma that everybody agrees to this point. Rabbi Eliezer says, if you're walking with the blood in the place where it's necessary, you bring it closer to the mizbeach, machshava peiselis. There the machshava shelo lishma will passel. Keitzad, and the brisa itself says, when is the case that it's necessary, you receive the blood further away from the mizbeach, and then he's walking with it closer towards the mizbeach. That's a hiluch that's necessary, and therefore it will passel. However, if you receive the blood closer to the mizbeach, and you walk with it away from the mizbeach, that's considered to be walking and delivering away from the mizbeach, and therefore over there a machshava shelo lishma will not passel. That's the language of the brisa. And this is the brisa explaining Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. So Abaye says, what do you see from here? This is how Rabbi Eliezer spells out his own opinion. So that means, ha chazar v'hichnisai. But in this case, where he went in, and then he went out, and he has to bring it back in again, hiluch shetzarech lahalachu. That will be considered to be a hiluch that is necessary now. Because what's the example that he's using here in the brisa? He's only using the example when he walked away. That's the hiluch she'ein tzarech. So it's mashma though, but if he walked in and now he went back out and now he has to come back in, he has to come back in now. So that's now it is necessary. So therefore it's mashma that everybody would agree to this point, which would mean then that really Rabbi Eliezer is not arguing on the Tanakama. Rabbi Eliezer agrees to the Tanakama. Rabbi Eliezer is just sort of coming to explain what the Tanakama is saying, that any kind of hiluch which is now necessary, the machshava will passel. According to Rab Shimon, though, that argues in the Mishnah, Rab Shimon comes to say, no, Rab Shimon holds any hiluch was not in essence necessary, because you could have shechted the carbon right near the Mizbeach. But Rabbi Eliezer and the Tanakama hold the same point. As long as right now it's necessary, the machshava you have then shelo lishma will passel. So this proves the point that Rav has said, that Rabbi Eliezer argues on this point. So Amalei, Rav says to Abaye, Tanya. If it says this clearly in a brisa, okay, so we learned it clearly in a brisa, that in such a case, the machshava shelo lishma will passel, since now b'poyel he has to bring it to the mizbeach. Hadron Allah kol Zevochim, we shall return to you. First perek of Masechet Zevochim. Yeah, perek kol Zevochim. This and continue the next perek tomorrow.